So in the last section, we tried to use a connection, but when it tried to get the metadata for the object, we hadn't implemented that yet, so we got an error. And now we're going to implement the metadata part of the connector. So this metadata, it will be the connector describing which objects and actions it supports, and we do that by implementing a metadata provider. So let's go implement that now. We'll move to Visual Studio. And if you look for the type here, it's get metadata provider. So we need to return a metadata provider. I'm just going to return a type here, a member variable, metadata provider. So I haven't named that yet, but we're going to go up here and create this. So it's private metadata provider. We haven't created this type either, but it will have to implement provider. Didn't like that. So we are going to create this new type. Got to remember to new that up as we do this. So I'm going to create a new file here. We're going to call that metadata provider. So here's the basics of the metadata provider. It's going to implement IMedatadaProvider. So we'll automatically implement that interface. So it's got a reset metadata, which we're not going to do a lot with today. Retrieve action definitions and retrieve method definitions, which we're going to leave as not implemented because we don't use method definitions at this point. And also retrieve method definitions. Sorry, the previous one was method definition, a singular, and this is method definitions. We're not going to implement either of those. And then retrieve object definition, the singular. We're going to implement that, and retrieve object definitions, which is the plural. And then a dispose method, which is we don't have anything to dispose, so we're just going to make that a no-op. So I'll do that now. And we'll do the same for reset. Now I have to start describing the data that we're going to have. So I've gone ahead and named some things here. So I've added some constant strings at the top. So we're going to have our greeting entity name, which is going to be greeting. This is a HelloWorld, so we're going to use a greeting entity. And then we're going to have a property called the greeting template. A message, which is going to be the actual HelloWorld message, and that's a property name of a greeting. And then the actions that we're going to support are going to be query and upsert. And then for completeness, I've added the username property as a constant so that we can use the same value in other parts of the application, or other parts of the connector. Okay, now we have to create functions that do create these enumerables. So I'm going to build that out. So here's an action definition. This is a private member that returns an enumerable of action definitions. And we're just going to hard code this data here. So the first action definition that I'm going to return here is a known action of query. It's got a description, and it uses our query action name up here. It doesn't support bulk. It does support constraints, which is a filter on a query. It does not. It does support lookup conditions in this case, which tends to be on the action side. It does not support multiple record operations, and we're not supporting relations or sequences in this for this query action. And then I'm also going to create another action definition, which is going to be an upsert, the name we used above. It's going to be the known action type is update insert, and I've set these properties here Notice here that it supports input as true and supports sequences as false. And then I need to implement the object definitions. I'm going to have another function here. It's getting a little off the screen, but we'll scroll that over a little bit. So get object definitions is going to return a list of object definitions. And when we create these object definitions, we're also going to return the properties that are underneath the object definitions. So for the object definition, we're only going to have the one. It's going to be the greeting entity name. We're going to use that for the name. We've provided a description. It's not hidden. We're going to reuse the greeting entity name for the name. And this is important, the supported action full names. So all the actions that can use the greeting entity need to be in a list for this property. So I've added in the query action name and the upsert action name. So we've got query and upsert supported for this entity. And then I need to list out the property definitions. So here I've got a message property, which we talked about earlier. And notice that the property type is of type string, and it uses the name of that. And this property is used in query select. So it's used in query select, but it is not used in action input. And what that means is that you can read this property, but you can't use it on a target operation. A lot of these other properties are false and describe different parts of how properties can be used. And then we also have the template property, and same type. But in this one, it is used in an action input, and it's not used in a query select. We'll see what that does for us. Okay, so now we have some basic enumerables that return the values we're talking about, but I need to implement the interface members as well. So first I'm going to create some member variables that gives us properties that represent these, and it's just a lazy loading of these properties. So essentially I'm declaring an action definitions property, and if it's null, I'm going to use the method that we just implemented to get it, and the same with object definitions. So then we need to implement the retrieve action definitions. So for this, I'm just going to return the property that we just created. And again, we're going to leave method definitions and method definition not implemented. We don't use those at this point. And for this, we're going to return, similar to the action definitions, the object definitions property that we just created. And then for the single, we're just going to create a link statement that will return the single value from this. And I'm going to return the object definition where the name equals the name that they're asking for from the retrieve object definition method. Object name. I didn't spell that correctly. It's going to let me know. And I'm actually trying to assign that, and I really want to check for equality. So let's build that and see if it works. It's all successful. So once again, we have to stop our agent and copy the files over so that they get used, so the new files get used. Here's our new files, moving them over. So we've copied those over. We'll restart our agent and then go back to Scribe Online. You can see that the agent's still shut down. We're going to wait for that to come back online. And there it is. So once again, we're going to try to create that solution again that we tried earlier, but we're unable to because we had not implemented metadata. I'm going to call it HelloWorld again. Also create an advanced map. And I'm going to pick the HelloWorld connection. And again, this is unable to retrieve metadata. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. So we have a bug in our program. So let's go back and see what we did wrong. Cancel out of here. I think that I forgot to initialize the metadata provider, which I knew we had to do. Yeah, so let's rebuild that. I think that will fix it. So we're going to stop that, recopy our files over again. Restart our agent. I'm going to restart this. We know we have our agent running. It's a little faster that time. So I'm going to create a new solution. And once again, I'm going to select the HelloWorld connection. We'll see if that bug fix was the problem. So again, that works. So we now have, you can see we have lookup, query, and upsert available to us as actions for this connector. We're going to use the HelloWorld connection on both sides here today. So our metadata worked, or at least some aspect of the metadata worked. We can see the actions that we were looking for, query and upsert. Lookup is similar to query and uses query. So we have that. So let's try to create a query and see exactly the entities that we have available to us. So if I go there, we have our greeting entity defined, and it's now trying to load the fields. So the first time we go out, we get the list of entities that are available and their actions, and the second time we get more detailed information like properties and fields on the object. Properties and fields are the same. I'm using that word interchangeably here. So if we wanted to look at, so we can see that that we have the message property here. If you remember, the greeting template property was not used in query select, so it didn't work. And right now, the connector is trying to go out and actually query that message to get the preview data back. But we haven't implemented execute query yet, so we're going to get a failure. And we're getting the not implemented exception because we have not implemented that, which we'll do next in the next section. So that was implementing metadata for the HelloWorld connector.